Hello everybody, my name is Dee and welcome to Books and Quirks. Today I'm going to be doing a wrap-up video and some book reviews of books that I finished this past week. So I finished two really wonderful books, both are historical fiction, and I cannot wait to tell you about them. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is one that I most recently finished, and that is The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This is a historical fiction novel that takes place in the early 19th century, and as you can imagine from the title, this is essentially about slavery and those trying to escape slavery into a better life. Now, I've read a lot of historical fiction as well as nonfiction regarding slavery. You know, this was very reminiscent of the actual slave narratives that I've read in the past. You know, for example, the autobiography or the slave narrative written by Frederick Douglass. Those are very, very powerful books. And although this is a fiction book, it was kind of reminiscent of that because this book was amazing, but amazing in the fact that it was very raw. It didn't sugarcoat anything, and it really depicted the lives and the suffering and the struggles and the horrific circumstances that all African Americans faced during this time. And I thought it was very powerful. You know, a fun aspect, if I could call it that, of this book is that with the Underground Railroad, you know, we all know that the real Underground Railroad in the U.S. was not an actual Underground Railroad. It was, a collection of safe houses and, you know, people willing to put up African Americans escaping from slavery, and they just moved from safe house to safe house. With this, it was an actual Underground Railroad that was built underground that transported slaves wanting to escape from the deep South, Florida, and Georgia. You know, this book starts out in Georgia up through the northern states. So this was not a very fast read. As you can imagine, when you have this type of subject matter, it does take a little bit of time. I needed to stop and really kind of digest some of what was happening. But it is a page turner, and, you know, my heart was in my throat for much of this. So the main character is Cora. She's a slave for this plantation in Georgia. And, you know, as with anything you can imagine, she has a very horrific life. And her mother disappeared when she was younger. We don't really know what happened to her mother at the beginning. Did she run away? You know, what was going on with that? And she's kind of all alone. And she's even an outcast in her own community of other slaves. You really feel for Cora. I loved Cora so much. I just wanted so much for this character. You know, even though they're fictional, I just become so attached. So, Cora is approached by another slave working for the plantation. His name is Caesar, and he knows of an Underground Railroad, and he plans to escape. And he invites Cora to accompany him and to escape with him. They both escape, they both run, and it starts from there. So I really recommend this. I really think that it's an important part of history. You know, whenever I come across books like this, I want to read them and just, you know, see. I think that it's just, you know, important to read them. And I definitely recommend this. I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. And yeah, I just think that it was well worth the accolades and the awards that it's been given so far. The next book that I finished last week and that I also gave 5 stars to was The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. Oh my gosh, this was such a wonderful, wonderful book. This is also historical fiction in the fact that it takes place in late 19th century London, and it follows a character. Her name is also Cora. So both books have the same name for the main character. And Cora is, at the beginning of the book, Her husband is dying, and once he does die, she takes her son and moves to the countryside in hopes for a better life, but also in hopes of sort of rediscovering herself. You know, she sort of becomes involved in some of her passions that she had when she was younger. One of those passions is finding fossils. She's very interested in, you know, archaeology and anthropology and those things, and she wants to find some fossil remains, and she also becomes quite engrossed in the folklore around this around Essex, where she takes her son. And there is this well-known story about an Essex serpent that lives under the water and sort of will take anyone that comes across its path. And it's only been seen a couple of times, and you know, it's everyone sort of has this fear of the Essex Serpent in the area. You know, it's a time when legends sort of ran rampant, and it was really quite a fun little tidbit of the story. But the story, so that's really the main premise of the story, but there's so much more to this book than that. So I will say that Cora's son Francis is an odd little fellow. He's very closed off, very much wanting just to be by himself. He has a very odd relationship with his mother, and I wasn't quite sure if I even liked him to begin with, but he grew on me a little bit by the end. While Cora is in Essex, she also meets other townsfolk. She becomes very friendly with the pastor and his wife. And there's also a little bit of an odd romance there, but it's not a romance book by any means. I do want to point that out, but there is a little bit of a strange kind of romance little part in it as well. So this book blends so many things. You know, I don't want to give anything away. I just think that it blends so many things at once, and it's so much more than just, you know, kind of a fantasy about a serpent. This book has so much of the science of the time, of the late 19th century. It brings a lot about faith during that time and legends. And another thing that I found amazing about this book was that although this was written by a modern day author in modern day times, it was very reminiscent of the actual authors of that time, like Dickens, for example. This was beautifully, beautifully written, and I just highly recommend this book. You know, there's so many other reviewers that speak so much more eloquently about this book, and I think you should read or watch some of those as well. I just absolutely loved this book and highly, highly recommend it.